Hello everyone, Hira here. Now we are going to listen to podcast news which includes important national, international and business, economy, news. While walking in the morning or evening, while cooking, cycling or during free time you can listen. It will enhance your learning and understanding of various accents and pronunciations. Listening improves the quality of communication and comprehension. Before going ahead, I would like to welcome you all to the virtual school, a new way of learning and teaching, with the vision of Let's Grow Together. Our mission is to learn how to learn and teach how to teach. So stay tuned. And here we go. 11th August 2021. National and international news. LS clears bill restoring states' rights to specify OBC groups. Lawmakers across parties call for removal of 50% cap on reservation. Special correspondent, New Delhi. The Lok Sabha on Tuesday passed the 127th Constitution Amendment Bill, 2021, with unanimous support from the House and not a single vote against, with Social Justice and Empowerment Minister Virendra Kumar stating that there was a need for careful examination of the demand made by several Lok Sabha MPs to remove the 50% cap on reservation currently in place. Orderly debate. Replying to the debate on the bill, the first such debate in an orderly manner in a session marked by 3 weeks of disruptions and adjournments, Dr. Kumar said the issue required a careful going over of legal and constitutional issues. In the Indra Sohni case, the court has observed that the limit can be increased beyond the 50% but only in certain special circumstances. The government is aware of the wishes of the members, he said. The minister said the current Constitution Amendment Bill was historic legislation as 671 castes in the country would benefit from it and restored the states' rights to make their own list of other backward classes, OBCs, and should be considered as the 105th Constitution Amendment Bill after being renumbered. Parties get 48 hours to publish candidates' criminal records. Supreme Court modifies its February 2020 judgment. Krishnadas Rajagopal, New Delhi. The Supreme Court on Tuesday warned Parliament that the nation is losing patience with the advent of criminals in politics even as it imposed fines on major political parties, including the BJP and the Congress, for covering up from voters the criminal past of the candidates they fielded in the Bihar Assembly poll last year. The court had directed political parties to publish the criminal history, if any, of their election candidates on the homepage of their websites under the caption, "Candidates with criminal antecedents" within 48 hours of their selection. Nation losing patience. The nation continues to wait, and is losing patience. Cleansing the polluted stream of politics is obviously not one of the immediate pressing concerns of the legislative branch of the government, a bench consisting of Justices Rohinton F. Nariman and B.R. Gawai told the lawmakers. Justice Nariman, who authored the 71-page judgment based on a plea by Advocate Brajesh Singh, said the Supreme Court's repeated appeals to legislators to amend the law to weed out the criminals amidst them had fallen on deaf ears. The court said it did not take political parties much time to flout its February 2020 judgment, which directed them to prominently publish the criminal antecedents of their candidates in newspapers and on social media accounts, including Twitter and Facebook. Inadequate information. 8 months from the February judgment, in the run-up to the Bihar Assembly election in October-November last year, these parties had already subverted the verdict by either publishing inadequate information about their candidates' criminal antecedents or by cleverly printing them in obscure newspapers. The court imposed a penalty of 1 rupee lakh each on the BJP, Congress, JD, RJD, Lok Janshakti Party and the Communist Party of India for subverting the February 2020 judgment. It imposed fines of 5 rupees lakh each on the Communist Party of India, Marxist, and the Nationalist Congress Party for completely ignoring the February judgment. In a series of directions to make the right of information of a voter more effective and meaningful, the court further ordered the Election Commission of India to launch a dedicated mobile app for voters to get details of the criminal history of the candidates at the touch of a button. The Commission should also form a separate cell to monitor political parties on their compliance with the court's judgment. Present books instead of bouquets. Karnataka Govt bans garlands, shawls, and fruits in official programs. Basavaraj Bommai. Special Correspondent Bangalore. The Karnataka government has banned presentation of garlands, bouquets, shawls, and fruits in official programs. It said organizers could, instead, present Kannada books to guests. The order was issued on Tuesday by Chief Secretary P. Ravikumar. All department heads and government undertakings have been asked to comply with the directions. Chief Minister Basavaraj Bommai, who participated in a meeting of senior police officials in Bangalore earlier in the day, refused to accept a bouquet. This is unnecessary expenditure. There is no need to give bouquets, garlands, and shawls in the name of protocol. Henceforth, the tradition should be stopped, he said. Government departments spend a lot of funds on presentation of shawls and flowers to guests at various programs. Sometimes these gifts are received multiple times in a single day by leaders, as they participate in several programs. Mr. Bommai had brought up the issue of cost-cutting in the first meeting with bureaucrats when he took oath as Chief Minister. He said that in the context of COVID-19, there was a need to bring in financial discipline and unnecessary expenditure should be curtailed. Newly sworn in Energy and Kannada and Culture Minister V. Sunil Kumar had appealed to those coming to greet him not to give garlands and gifts and asked for Kannada books instead, which he would donate to a library in the Karkala constituency. At the meeting with police officials, Mr. Bommai urged the force to be people-friendly and initiate measures to bring the crime rate under control. India to evacuate its personnel. Military aircraft likely to be used to fly out citizens from Mazar-e-Sharif. The embassy in Kabul has urged Indians to make quick travel arrangements. Afpuakil Kohza. Kallol Bhattacharjee, New Delhi. India will temporarily relocate its personnel from the consulate in Mazar-e-Sharif in Afghanistan, an official said on Tuesday. The decision came on a day when the government gave an urgent call for evacuation of all Indian nationals from the Afghan city on a special flight. In a separate statement, the Embassy of India in Kabul has urged all Indian citizens in Afghanistan to make immediate travel arrangements before commercial flights are discontinued because of intensifying conflict. Tuesday's declarations came against the backdrop of Taliban forces rushing to the periphery of Mazar-e-Sharif after their latest conquest of Kunduz city near the border with Tajikistan. A special flight is leaving from Mazar-e-Sharif to New Delhi. Any Indian nationals in and around Mazar-e-Sharif are requested to leave for India in the special flight scheduled to depart late today evening. Indian citizens desiring to leave by the special flight should immediately convey their full name, passport number, date of expiry by WhatsApp at the following numbers: 078589130 and 07858913001, said the Twitter handle of the consulate. It is understood that a military aircraft will be used to bring back both Indian officials as well as citizens from the besieged Afghan city. Temporary shutdown. The temporary shutdown of the Indian mission comes a month after India evacuated personnel from the consulate in Kandahar, effectively ending all consular work there. We are evacuating all India-based personnel from Mazar-e Sharif. The consulate will remain there under the care of the local staff, said an official. The Embassy of India in Kabul has called upon Indian nationals to take immediate necessary steps to ensure physical safety. A public notice has urged Indians to make immediate travel arrangements before flights between India and Afghanistan are discontinued because of escalating violence between Taliban and Afghan military. Indian companies operating in Afghanistan are strongly advised to immediately withdraw their Indian employees out of project sites in Afghanistan before air travel services get discontinued, said the Indian embassy, which also urged Indian media personnel reporting from the ground to follow security protocol because of rapid changes in security situation on the ground. The development came 2 days after the fall of the city of Kunduz to Taliban. 29% of students exposed to second-hand smoke survey analyzes tobacco use. The government is pressing for more awareness drives among the youth. Special Correspondent, New Delhi. More than 29% of students in India were exposed to second-hand smoke, said the Global Youth Tobacco Survey, GYTS4, India, 2019, which was released by Health Minister Mansukh Mandavia on Tuesday. The national fact sheet said there has been a 42% decline in tobacco use among 13-15-year-old school children in the past decade. It added that use of any form of tobacco was higher among boys and tobacco use among school children was highest in Arunachal Pradesh and Mizoram and lowest in Himachal Pradesh and Karnataka. The report also found that 38% of cigarettes, 47% of bidi smokers and 52% of smokeless tobacco users initiated the use before their 10th birthday. The median age of initiation to cigarette and bidi smoking and smokeless tobacco use was 11.5 years, 10.5 years and 9.9 years, respectively. Role of teachers. Releasing the report, the health minister emphasized the role of teachers as most crucial in creating awareness among children and their parents of the harm due to tobacco use and for shaping the attitude of children in this regard. He said, "The more and the sooner we create awareness among children about harms due to tobacco use, the better will be the outcomes in terms of reduction in prevalence of tobacco use among children and consequently among adults." Harmful effects of tobacco use should be incorporated in school curricula at various levels starting right from the primary school level, he added. The fourth round of Global Youth Tobacco Survey, GYTS4, was conducted in 2019 by the International Institute for Population Sciences, IIPS, under the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, MOHFW. The survey was designed to produce national estimates of tobacco use among school-going children aged 13 to 15 years at the state level and union territory, UT, by sex, location of school, rural-urban, and management of school, public-private. The first 3 rounds of GYTS were conducted in 2003, 2006 and 2009. A total of 97,302 students from 987 schools, public 544, private 443, participated in the survey, of which 80,772 students aged 13 to 15 years were considered for reporting. Thank you. Global News. Cuomo resigns over sex abuse charges. Decision comes after New York AG's investigation found the governor sexually harassed 11 women. Governor Andrew Cuomo in New York. AFP file. Associated Press, New York. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo resigned on Tuesday over a barrage of sexual harassment allegations in a fall from grace a year after he was widely hailed nationally for his detailed daily briefings and leadership during the darkest days of COVID-19. The three-term governor's decision, which will take effect in 2 weeks, was announced as momentum built in the legislature to remove him by impeachment. It came after New York's Attorney General released the results of an investigation that found Cuomo sexually harassed at least 11 women. Investigators said he subjected women to unwanted kisses, groped their breasts or buttocks or otherwise touched them inappropriately, made insinuating remarks about their looks and their sex lives, and created a work environment rife with fear and intimidation. Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul, a 62-year-old Democrat and former member of Congress from the Buffalo area, will become the state's 57th governor and the first woman to hold the post. The Hush Metuera scandal cut short not just a career but a dynasty. Mr. Cuomo's father, Mario Cuomo, was governor in the 1980s and 1990s, and the younger Cuomo was often mentioned as a potential candidate for president, an office his father famously contemplated seeking. Even as the scandal mushroomed, Mr. Cuomo was planning to run for re-election in 2022. Mr. Cuomo still faces the possibility of criminal charges, with a number of prosecutors around the state moving to investigate him. The string of accusations that spelled the governor's downfall began to unfold in news reports last December and went on for months. Mr. Cuomo called some of the allegations fabricated, forcefully denying he touched anyone inappropriately. But he acknowledged making some aides uncomfortable with comments he said he intended as playful, and he apologized for some of his behavior. He portrayed some of the encounters as misunderstandings attributable to generational or cultural differences, a reference in part to his upbringing in an affectionate Italian-American family. As a defiant Mr. Cuomo clung to office, state lawmakers launched an impeachment investigation, and nearly the entire Democratic establishment in New York deserted him, not only over the accusations, but also because of the discovery that his administration had concealed thousands of COVID-19 deaths among nursing home patients. The harassment investigation ordered up by the Attorney General and conducted by 2 outside lawyers corroborated the women's accounts and added lurid new ones. There should be no surprises in Indo-Sri Lanka relations. Ties should become strategic and special, says new envoy. Task ahead, Milinda Moragoda, Sri Lanka's High Commissioner designate to India. Special arrangement. Meera Srinivasan, Colombo. India and Sri Lanka should maintain open and regular communication across multiple channels and ensure there are no surprises to either side, according to Milinda Moragoda, shortly to assume duties as Sri Lanka's High Commissioner in New Delhi. Speaking to The Hindu in Colombo, Mr. Moragoda, who recently submitted a roadmap to President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, outlining proposals for strengthening Indo-Lanka ties, said that while the relationship is evidently asymmetric, the focus must be on elevating bilateral ties from the current, transactional, phase to one that is more strategic. It has to evolve into a special relationship. That should be our aim, said the High Commissioner designate, who has been awarded a cabinet rank by the Sri Lankan government, effectively enabling him to report directly to President Rajapaksa. Political solution. The roadmap itself came amid considerable strain in relations. In a surprise move earlier this year, Sri Lanka unilaterally dropped a 2019 plan to jointly develop the East Container Terminal at the Colombo port with India and Japan. Citing domestic opposition to foreign investment in strategic national asset, the Rajapaksa administration reneged on the trilateral agreement signed by the predecessor government, instead offering the West Container Terminal to the Adani Group in India. Further, Mr. Moraghoda's strategy paper lays out plans to enhance investment prospects, religious and cultural ties, but makes no mention of expediting a political solution to Sri Lanka's national question that has remained a cornerstone of India's engagement. Observing that President Rajapaksa is leading a diverse coalition, Mr. Moraghoda said a political solution or post-war reconciliation must be homegrown. A political solution is not all about laws and the constitution, he said. Mr. Moraghoda, 57, is a businessman and a former politician who has held key ministries in past governments. He was earlier aligned to former PM Ranil Wickremesinghe and was a prominent arbiter in the government's peace talks with the LTTE, brokered by Norway in the early 2000s. He is also the founder of the Colombo-based think tank, Pathfinder Foundation. Mr. Moraghoda has advocated the abolition of provincial councils, arguing that the structure has proved superfluous, expensive, divisive, and is fraught with inefficiency. That is my personal view, Mr. Moraghoda said, of the provincial structure envisioned in Indo-Lanka Accord of 1987. I believe we should look at a model where we devolve more power to the local governments instead, while keeping a Senate at the center, where all ethnic groups are fairly represented, he said. Sri Lanka's 9 provincial councils have remained defunct for at least 2 years, pending elections. Asked about frequent calls to repeal the provincial council system, from Sinhala nationalists including those in government, Mr. Moraghoda said, as of now, the provincial council system is very much part of our constitution, and there is no threat. However, elections to the councils will have to wait until we have a consensus on a new electoral system in parliament. Thousands flee amid Taliban gains in north. The insurgents now have their eyes on Mazar-e-Sharif, northern Afghanistan's biggest city. Agence France Presse Kabul. The Taliban were in control of 8 Afghan provincial capitals on Tuesday after a blitz across the north forced tens of thousands of people to flee their homes for the relative safety of Kabul and other centers. The insurgents now have their eyes on Mazar-e-Sharif, the north's biggest city, whose fall would signal the total collapse of government control in a region that has traditionally been anti-Taliban. Government forces are also battling the hardline Islamists in Kandahar and Helmand, the southern Pashto-speaking provinces from where the Taliban draw their strength. The United States, due to complete a troop withdrawal at the end of the month and end its longest war, has all but left the battlefield. However, Washington's Special Envoy Zalmay Khalilzad is now in Qatar to try and convince the Taliban to accept a ceasefire. Envoys from hosts Qatar, Britain, China, Pakistan, Uzbekistan, the United Nations, and EU were due to discuss the situation in Afghanistan, a source told AFP. But even with a new round of talks in the works, Pentagon spokesman John Kirby said it was down to the Afghan government and its forces to turn the tide, and there was not much the US could do to help. On the move, the Taliban have appeared largely indifferent to peace overtures, and seem intent on a military victory to return to power after their ouster 20 years ago in the wake of the September 11 attacks. As fighting raged, tens of thousands of people were on the move inside the country, with families fleeing newly captured Taliban cities with tales of brutal treatment at the hands of the insurgents. The Taliban are beating and looting, said Rahima, now camped out with hundreds of families at a park in the capital, Kabul, after fleeing Sheberghan province. If there is a young girl or a widow in a family, they forcibly take them. We fled to protect our honor. We are so exhausted, added Farid, an evacuee from Kunduz who did not want to be further identified. In the northern city of Kunduz that was captured by the Taliban over the weekend, residents said shops had begun to reopen as insurgents focused their attention on government forces who had retreated to the airport. People are opening their shops and businesses, but you can still see fear in their eyes, said shopkeeper Habibullah. On Tuesday, the Taliban captured Puli-Kumri, capital of Baghlan province, and Farah city. Hong Kong set to adopt China's anti-sanctions law, violators to face visa denial, deportation. Carrie Lam. Agence France Presse Hong Kong. China's anti-sanctions law will be implemented in some form in Hong Kong, the city's leader confirmed on Tuesday, a move that will add fresh regulatory pressure on international companies in the finance hub. Beijing's rubber stamp legislature passed the law in June in response to Western penalties that were imposed following crackdowns in Hong Kong and Xinjiang. Its powers include denying visas, deportation, or seizing assets of those who formulate or comply with sanctions against Chinese businesses or officials. Foreign companies can be sued in Chinese courts for applying sanctions, and the law can also be wielded against family members. On Tuesday, Hong Kong's chief executive Carrie Lam confirmed Beijing had consulted her on adding the law to the city's mini-constitution, known as the Basic Law. The purpose of the anti-sanctions law is to defend our country's sovereignty, security and development interests, she told reporters. But she said Beijing could also impose the measures directly, like it did with a national security law last year that snuffed out dissent. Some foreign forces, foreign governments and Western media will definitely stir up this issue, hoping to weaken our status as a financial center or the outside world's confidence in Hong Kong, she said. International companies face being punished by each side if they adhere to either sanctions regime. A bank that refuses to implement US sanctions, for example, could find itself cut off from access to the dollar. But those that adhere could find themselves in hot water with Beijing. In Korea was to strengthen capabilities. Associated Press Seoul. The powerful sister of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un ripped South Korea for proceeding with military exercises with the US that she said are an invasion rehearsal, and warned on Tuesday that the North will work faster to strengthen its preemptive strike capabilities. Kim Yo-jong's statement came after South Korean media reported that the allied militaries will begin 4 days of preliminary training on Tuesday before holding computer-simulated drills on August 16 to 26. Ms. Kim said she was given authority to release the statement, implying the message came directly from her brother. Hours after her comments were published on state media, South Korea's Defense and Unification Ministries said North Korean officials hadn't responded to their calls on Tuesday afternoon over inter-Korean hotlines, which had been disconnected for a year before North Korea agreed to reopen them in late July. Iranian denies part in 1988 execution. Ex-prison official being tried in Sweden over his role in the killing of political dissidents. Protesters in Stockholm seeking justice for political prisoners killed in Iran. AP. Agence France Presse Stockholm. Lawyers for a former Iranian prison official denied his involvement in the 1988 execution of thousands of political dissidents on Tuesday, on the first day of a landmark case in Sweden likely to stoke tensions in the Islamic Republic. Hamid Nouri, 60, appeared relaxed and smiling in Stockholm District Court while his defense counsel Daniel Marcus refuted the charges including murder and war crimes, dating from between July 30 and 16 August 1988, when Nouri was assistant to the deputy prosecutor of Gohradasht prison in Karaj, near Tehran. Earlier Christina Lindopfer Carlson, for the prosecution, read out the indictment which accused Nouri of intentionally taking the life of a very large number of prisoners sympathetic to or belonging to the People's Mujahedin, MEK. MEK supporters were among several hundred protesters who gathered outside the court carrying photos of the dead and called for justice for the estimated 5,000 prisoners killed across Iran, allegedly under the orders of Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khomeini in reprisal for attacks carried out by the MEK at the end of the Iran-Iraq War of 1980–88. The demonstrators urged Swedish and international justice to condemn Iran's newly inaugurated President Ebrahim Raisi, also accused by rights groups of involvement in the extrajudicial killings. Swedish court officials believe Tuesday's case is the first of its kind against someone accused over the killings. A verdict in the three-day case is expected in April 2022. The allegations were brought to the attention of the Swedish authorities by a group of 30 complainants. Over 200 held in Saudi anti-corruption purge drive against graft began in 2017. Associated Press Dubai. Saudi Arabia announced the arrest of 207 employees across about a dozen ministries in the latest sweep by an anti-corruption body empowered by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Those detained were not named and it was unclear when the arrests were made. The kingdom's National Anti-Corruption Commission, known as NAZHA, announced the arrests late on Monday. The Crown Prince's anti-corruption purge began in late 2017. It has helped him consolidate power and netted the kingdom $106 billion in assets. Saudi nationals have long complained of rampant corruption in government and of public funds being squandered or misused by those in power. The commission said more than 460 people were investigated in this latest round, and that as a result, 207 Saudi citizens and residents were detained on allegations of corruption, abuse of authority and fraud. Those accused will be referred to prosecution. They hail from the National Guard and a range of ministries, including Defense, Interior, Health and Justice. Banned scribe calls Imran a helpless PM. Press Trust of India Islamabad. Hamid Mir, a prominent Pakistani journalist who was taken off air indefinitely for making hard-hitting remarks against the military, has said that Imran Khan is a helpless prime minister and underlined that there is a growing climate of fear for media personnel in the country. Mr. Mir, the host of the now off-air talk show, Capital Talk, of Geo News Channel, on May 28 delivered a fiery speech at a protest staged by scribes against an attack by unknown persons against journalist Asad Ali Toor in Islamabad. Thank you. Thank you so much for watching this video as a podcast. Do like, share and comment. Press the subscribe button and hit the bell icon to get new notifications. Thank you. Take care and stay safe. God bless you all. Gemma Bharti. To download news and editorials in MP3, follow us on Telegram, Virtual School Official. The link is provided in the description below.